Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hof, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers. Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hof, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers. Hi, welcome. Today I have with me Ashley Webb, Director of Operations at Kingswood U.S. She is the mom of one and a former doula, my former doula, with my first delivery. Ashley, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Ashley's a little under the weather today. She's feeling a little hoarse, but she's got this nice, lovely little sultry voice going on.
Yeah, I do.
All right, Ashley, I'm excited to hear your story. Let's get to it.
Okay, so I went into pregnancy thinking I was the most prepared person in the world because I had experience as a doula, and that was not the case at all. Life really was like, haha, got you. So I was an athlete. My body was super healthy, and pregnancy just kind of threw a wrench in it. And my OB kind of explained it that way. She was like, you have a fine-tuned machine being an athlete, and you've thrown a wrench in your engine. So the first trimester was super miserable. I was sick all the time. I never threw up, but I was very, very sick all the time. I had heart palpitations because my resting heart rate was about 52 beats per minute normally. And when you're pregnant, you produce 50% more blood. So it jumped up between 75 and 85 resting, which made me feel like I was having a heart attack all the time, which was really, really awful and gave me anxiety, which I had never really experienced before. So I got through my first trimester, the second came, and the morning sickness did go away magically, like they say, which was really great. But I traded that for like 5 other things. One of them was I got pregnancy carpal tunnel. So it started in my fingertips and slowly worked its way all the way up and to about where my Apple Watch is, and my hands were completely numb. And I work on a computer and I type most of the time. So imagine all day typing and not being able to feel your fingers. It was very weird. The heart palpitations continued. The heartburn was on another level. I felt like I was throwing up acid at any minute. And then I started to get hemorrhoids, which is one of those things that we discussed that women are embarrassed to talk about. No one ever told me, hey, you're only 4 months, haven't really gained that much weight yet, but you're going to get hemorrhoids already. So that wasn't fun. And nothing I did made them go away, which obviously as I continued to get bigger and heavier, they got bigger and more annoying as well. And then I also had an issue where my body was producing too much relaxin too quickly. So I forget the official name of it, but it basically feels like your leg is ripping out of your pelvic bone. And it makes getting in and out of a vehicle, basic life things, like sitting up in bed and getting out of bed really, really hard. It felt like my leg was literally ripping off of my body. And again, I was super active. I went into pregnancy like, oh, I'm going to work out my whole pregnancy, blah, blah, blah. And around month 5, I came to a grinding halt. And the only thing I could really do was walk in my neighborhood very slowly. And that was kind of what I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I also teetered on the edge of pregnancy diabetes, which was weird too, because again, I didn't eat awful. I was very healthy. My sister had it. So I don't know if it's just hereditary or what. My mom didn't have it. None of my aunts did, but my sister had it both her pregnancies. So I had to watch what I ate. I couldn't really work out. And along that, I was like, you know what? I really want to have a home birth. Nothing is going the way I want it to go this pregnancy. I waited till my 30s to have a baby thinking, oh, it's great. I have all my life in order. It's going to be so good. Not knowing my body was be like, this is your punishment for waiting. You're old and it's going to be hard. So I found a doula here in Georgia because I had moved from New York City to Georgia. And the healthcare system here is very different. New York, it's cool to do a home birth and people are very health conscious and they want to do everything they can to prevent interventions and stuff. Here in the South, it's the opposite, to be very frank, in many ways. I was really lucky. I found my OB was actually a part of a midwife practice where I saw primarily midwives, and they were very accommodating. And I was very upfront with them that I wanted to have a home birth and that I would continue to see them because that was my compromise with my husband. He was terrified of a home birth. It took lots of talking, and then him meeting our home birth midwife, Angelina, who is the bomb here. She made him feel very comfortable because she's very down to earth, very chill. I think my husband thought it was going to be like candles all around me and like granola and stuff. And she came in like, what's up? And he was like, oh, okay, we could do this. But the compromise was I would continue to see my normal practitioner in case something didn't go right. I had backup, which I was okay with. That's fine. My insurance covered that anyways. So the midwife was great. I loved her, but I didn't start officially seeing her till about 30 weeks. So I was already well into my journey when I finally had convinced my husband. So the third trimester comes. I barely can move. I'm retaining so much fluid that people are swearing my baby's going to be a 10-pound baby at this point. And in my mind, in my doula mind, I'm like, yeah, right. He's probably going to be tiny, because majority of the time when they say that, it's not the case because it's just a guess. No one knows, right? So he was breech, and my midwife maneuvered him for me and got him head down around, I want to say it was around 34 weeks. She successfully got him head down for me, and he stayed. And I just got more and more miserable, as all women do towards the end. I got to the point where my husband had to help me out of the car because my leg was in so much pain. I would just lay in bed and cry. And I was miserable. That's all there is to say. I was miserable. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. It was just bad. So every week you have to go to your regular practitioner once you hit that last month. So I was at my 39-week checkup, and I had asked them to give me my flu shot because I'm thinking, I'm getting close. If I do have him, I want to have the antibodies in my breast milk for him. So they gave me my flu shot that morning, and then I went home, and around maybe noon, I went to go pee, and my mucus plug came out. And even again, being a doula, I text the picture to my midwife, like, is this my mucus plug? And she's like, yes. So I had everything ready. I had my medicine ball. We had all of our home birth stuff ready. And I just was like, okay, cool. I started contractions that afternoon, probably around 5. And they were pretty consistent, pretty fast. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is not what I was expecting. First babies usually take really, really long. And that night, there was a point where I was like every 90 seconds having a contraction that was lasting like a good 60 seconds or so. And they were just totally destroying me. So I got no sleep at all that night. And my midwife's like, just keep me posted. That morning, the next morning, Thursday morning, things just stopped. My doula brain kicks in. I'm like, oh man. So I call my doula, because I had a doula too, of course, who was awesome. And she's like, sleep, get some sleep as much as you can today. I'm going to come over this evening and we're going to walk the hills in your neighborhood. And we're going to get labor going again. I forgot to mention too, my midwife had me taking a natural supplement that you start taking around 36 weeks to prepare your body for labor. And I had started doing the primrose oil vaginally around 37 weeks or so. So I think all of that combined really got my body ready. So that day I slept as much as I could. I was getting contractions, but they were spaced out like maybe 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And then my doula came over and we went and walked the neighborhood. And sure enough, as soon as we got done and she left, they started coming hard and strong again. So at this point, my mom's like, I'm flying across the country. I'm not waiting because I was not due for another 2 weeks really. So she is getting on a plane and I'm telling my husband, I think we're going to have a September 11th baby because Friday would be the 11th. And I'm like, I don't want to have a September 11th baby. Like, that doesn't bode well, And so Thursday night, I'm going through all the phases. I'm throwing up. It's fast. It's strong. It's hard. I'm having lots of back labor though. Something just tells me like it's getting close. So my midwife came that morning around, I want to say she came around 9. My doula came around like 6 a.m. And they had me walking the house, squatting on the stool, sitting on the toilet with my legs up to help get baby in position. She checks me. I'm about 6 or so centimeters dilated. So I'm progressing. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm doing this. This is like my ultimate goal, is to be able to have this moment of power and control over, again, a process that so far has been absolutely miserable for me. So every contraction, I'm like, I can do this. I'm ready. So it's probably around like 10 or 11 a.m. And I'm like, I want to get in the birth pool. I want water. And the house we were living at that time had little tiny showers that I'm a beach well. I cannot get in anymore. So they get the birth pool ready for me. I get in, I'm laboring in the birth pool, and I start feeling the urge to push. And I'm like, okay, I think it's time. And my midwife, they're very like, go with what your body tells you. So I'm starting to push a little bit. And she went to check me. And as she checked me, I literally remember feeling like it was like she was scraping my insides out. And I screamed out in pain. And she was like, that's not, you shouldn't sound like that. Get out. So she made me get out and she checked me. And sure enough, my son had turned his head. So he went from being tucked in how he should to now he's turned and the long part of his head is what's facing. So she was very honest and kept it very real. Because at this point, it's like maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon. She's like, we can continue to try to get him to move. But he is so far down now, pushing on your cervix, that is causing, the way he's moved is basically causing your cervix to start to swell. So you're losing that nice, soft, thin, effaced cervix. At this point, you have to keep in mind, I've been in labor naturally since Wednesday afternoon. It's now Friday afternoon. And I remember looking at my husband. I hadn't really ate anything, nauseous. I don't want to eat. I haven't really slept. I haven't slept like any pregnant woman does for months prior to that anyways. And I remember looking at my husband and him being like, it's your call. Something in me was like, I cannot. And it was the instinct, like, he's not going to turn. Like, he's just not. So my practitioner group that I had went to was about a 35-minute drive from where we were living. So in my mind, I'm already like, I also have to make this drive to the hospital because I don't want to go to the hospital here where we live. I want to go where my group is. And so I just made the call because she's like, if you get an epidural, it might help your body relax and it might let your cervix also relax again and let him reposition. But if you're here, this is what it's going to be for a lot longer. So I made the call and I did the transfer to the hospital, and I will say they were wonderful. Where I went, from the moment I stepped in, then every single nurse was wonderful. My providers that were there were wonderful. And since I had seen most of them, I'm comfortable with all of them. They ended up giving me the epidural, and that in itself was another disaster. He poked through both layers of my spine. So I ended up not being able to sit up or get up and walk without like fireworks exploding in my head, which I guess is something that happens when they mess up an epidural, which again, I had never heard of. A woman had never told me like, hey, my epidural got messed up, So they also gave me Pitocin, which I did not want. I was so against Pitocin, but I was in full surrender at that point. I'm like, I've been in labor since Wednesday. I just want to have my baby. I just want to see my baby. I just want to kiss my baby. So they gave me the Pitocin all night long. They also gave me Benadryl in my IV to try to bring the swelling down. They had me switching sides with the peanut ball all night long. They come in and check me. And mind you, when I got there, I was actually around 8 centimeters when I first got there. In the morning around 5 a.m. when they checked me, I had went all the way back down to a 3. So I had completely reversed. And they said the whole left side of my cervix was totally swollen now. And I remember the nurse looking at me and they didn't have to tell me. I was like, I'm getting a C-section. So I went from, I'm having a home birth, I'm going to have the one thing that I do want, to now I've had every intervention that I completely planned to not have and was completely against. And I'm getting a C-section, which was my ultimate, I don't want to. And both my sisters had birthed their babies vaginally. One of them, her baby was almost 10 pounds. And I'm sitting there like, why? So I just looked at my husband. I'm like, all right, it is what it is. Let's get it over with. So now it's Saturday. And my son was born via C-section, and they took me into the recovery room. And I remember I'm holding my baby, trying to breastfeed, and I'm feeling like I'm going to pass out. And my husband's like, her lips are turning blue. She's pale. And the nurse was like, oh, it's just all the hormones and the medicine. And I'm like, I just really don't feel good. And come to find out, they go back and look, and I had lost way too much blood. So they have to give me like 2 bags of blood. Mind you, I'm also still not able to really sit up because of my head and my epidural issue. So over the next 3 days, as they hold me, because I had a C-section, trying to breastfeed my baby, I can't sit up, cannot get up and change his diaper. Going to the bathroom is like the greatest feat ever because of these exploding headaches that made me feel nauseous and my vision blurred. And they tried a caffeine IV. They tried everything. And finally, on my last day, the anesthesiologist came in and was like, so there's one last thing we can do called the blood patch. I never heard of a blood patch. I'm like, what? What's a blood patch? And he explains basically a nurse will stand in front of me as I sit up. They will draw my blood out of my arm and immediately pass the syringe back to the anesthesiologist, who will then inject it in the very same injection sites where he put my epidural to run the blood up my spine. And then I have to lay down completely flat for 30 minutes. And then they'll elevate me little by little by little over a course of another 30 minutes so that the blood can basically go in and patch those holes that he created with the epidural and cease my headaches, because the spinal fluid leaking is what causes the headaches, I guess.
Are you pregnant and planning a hospital birth? You don't need a birth plan. You need a birth vision. In my opinion, birth plans set you up for failure. Yep, I said it. Hear me out before you turn off this podcast. You may think that by downloading a generic birth plan, it means you're in control. The truth is, it's not that simple. No one can control exactly how their birth will go. There are way too many variables. What every pregnant person wants is to walk into the hospital pregnant and to walk out with a healthy newborn in their arms. The journey in between is the murky part. It's hard to know what issues might come up that need to be addressed. If you focus your energy on a birth vision rather than giving your power to a birth plan, you can empower yourself to make the best choices for you and your baby. That's why you need to get into my Empowered Hospital Birth program. As a labor nurse and mindset coach, I can help guide you through the process of maintaining the calm autonomy that will help you achieve the birth vision you desire. In my Empowered Hospital Birth program, I will help you identify the source of anxiety you have surrounding hospital birth, fill in knowledge gaps to make sure that you are fully informed and confident, learn key phrases so you can better communicate with your medical team, emotionally process your fears so that they don't hold power over you. Go to kellyhof.com/empowered to book a free 30-minute private birth vision call, where we will identify your top fears and must-haves and gain clarity on exactly how you want to feel in the birth space. That's kellyhof.com/empowered. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey.
So I did it, and it was extremely painful. I'm not even going to lie. Epidurals, I don't know why that's another thing women don't talk about, how much they hurt. They do hurt. Getting it re-injected in the exact same places 3 days after was very, very painful. And the process of the blood patch was very uncomfortable because as they're putting the blood in, it felt like steel rods like going up my back. It was a very weird sensation. So I'm dealing with all that, plus these hemorrhoids, right? They were gigantic because I've been laboring at home for 3 days. And I pushed naturally for a little bit. So I have these gigantic, I can't even tell you. I was horrified when I finally got the courage to and they give you the cream and all those other things. And I remember asking my OB, what can I do for them? And she was just basically like, deal with them, put the cream on them. It'll make them smaller, but most women just deal with them because the process to remove them is incredibly painful. And I'm thinking, as a new mom, I have my guts just taken out. My breasts are huge and swollen. I'm losing my baby weight minute by minute because of all the fluid I retain. And now I have these huge things. And I'm thinking my intimacy with my partner, or even just going to the bathroom. And again, no woman ever told me this. Not even my doula clients ever mentioned I have these gigantic hemorrhoids. So yeah, it was pretty traumatic. I went home with him, and my breastfeeding journey wasn't easy either. Even all that I know about that, it wasn't easy. And thank God for my doula. She's literally saved me from a plug duct where I was getting fever and the chills and all of that. She came and milked me like a cow and got it out for me. It took me a long time, honestly, to come to terms with my birth story because it was not anything that I wanted. And I, as a doula, had seen these amazing moments of triumph for women, even hospital births where they got to vaginally have their baby, or you had a C-section and that's what you wanted. And you went in and you're like, this is what I want. And you were totally okay with that. To me, that's empowering still. But I didn't get anything I wanted except obviously my baby at the end. And it was really, really hard to come to terms with that. I had what I called birth envy, and all the birth pages I would follow. It really, it frustrated me because I just couldn't do what I set out to do. And as a woman and as an athlete and a competitive person and all those things, it just felt like an epic failure. Looking back now, I think I've made peace with most of it in the sense that knowing my son now, he's 2 now, and the personality he has and how crazy he is, I don't think he ever would have turned. He's the most stubborn, crazy little boy ever. And if he doesn't want to do it, he's not doing it. And it does not matter. So I think he was in there and he was like, just, hi, Mom, I'm not coming out. So yeah, that's my birth story. And it wasn't what I wanted, but it's mine. So.
Right. Well, I'm glad you're both healthy. I'm sorry you went through just about everything. You literally had everything. You had the full birth experience.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the epidural, because the majority of people get an epidural.
Yeah.
At least in my experience.
Yeah.
Like you said, it can be a painful experience, especially if it's not an easy place to find. So when we do other types of epidurals in other types of medicine, it can be done via ultrasound. But in the labor process, it has to be by feel.
Yeah.
So it's not as perfect and scientific as it could be.
Which I found out.
And most of the time, everything is fine. You're not a big person, so there's not as much room for error.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, you probably had very tight spinal muscles because you're very athletic.
Yep.
So what can happen is that little minuscule space, when they go in with that relatively large needle, they may have had to push a little harder to get through your tissue. And maybe once they got past the tissue and into the epidural space, it went just a hair farther than it was supposed to. And then just everything started leaking.
Yeah.
Which is horrible for you.
I know I was probably no help at that point. Because again, I was on day 2.5 of natural labor. And at that point, I'm like, give me the epidural. I'm tired. I just want to take a nap. And I'm still having contractions every minute and a half. And he's trying to do it. I'm trying to hold still. So I'm sure I wasn't the most still patient either, So I'm sure I did not help him. He was the nicest guy. And he felt so bad. But
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's always a possibility. We just pray that it doesn't happen most of the time. And then they have to feed that epidural catheter into that tiny little space.
Yeah.
And just pray that it goes to the right place.
Yeah.
That little catheter, it can move to where you don't want it to.
Right.
So they can be a complete blessing, but there's definitely side effects that can happen. Thankfully, rarely. Did you get relief after the blood patch?
Yes. Yeah, I did. And it was immediate. It was actually one of those wonders of medicine where they do this thing that who would know injecting your own blood into your spine would fix that, But I remember after 3 days of not being able to sit up, imagine you have your newborn baby. All you want to do is hold your baby, and I'm trying to breastfeed. So all I can do is do side laying, to feed him. And the first time I got to sit up afterwards and my head didn't explode and I didn't, go nauseous and see stars, I was like, oh my God, yes, my head doesn't hurt, which was really great.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. What emotional work did you have to do to begin to process everything?
Oh my gosh. So I had a friend who was pregnant at the same time as me, and she had her baby about a month and a half before, and it was her second. And her and I were constantly texting and talking, And I remember her telling me, after the baby's born, you're going to get what's called the baby blues. Do not let yourself spiral with it. She was like, you're going to be emotional. You're going to feel sad. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to feel all the feelings. Just try to keep in your mind, it's just the baby blues and your body's hormones evening out. And I never really fully took maternity leave because what I do here at my firm, a lot of stuff I do, no one else knows how to do. So I had kind of negotiated with my boss that I could take as long as I wanted, but I would still be online a few times throughout the week and stuff. And looking back, those two things I think were the huge factors in me not spiraling into postpartum, because I think I had a lot of other things that were contributors that could have pushed me into that, feeling like a failure, the recovery from the C-section, which is really, really hard, not being great at breastfeeding and struggling with that at first. But I remember one day getting in the shower and just crying. And I started to get vertigo because I have issues with my inner ear, and the lack of sleep was agitating my vertigo. So I'm like, how am I going to care for my baby when I'm so dizzy? Just in the shower, just bawling. And I just heard my friend's voice, just the baby blues. You're okay. And I remember grabbing the sides of the shower and being like, it's just the baby blues. It's okay. Just let it out. It's just the baby blues. And then working a little bit still, I think it helped give my mind something to focus on other than how tired I was and how sad and depressed I was about my birth outcome. I think those things really helped me maybe not cope, but maybe get through those times. And then now here I am 2 years later, just being a very logical, realistic person that even though I didn't want those things are the reason why my son is here. And maybe without those things, who knows what could have happened, right? And nobody wants to wonder what could have happened to your baby or to you. So now I'm thankful. Now I have this wonderful, wild little 2-year-old because of it. It did take a lot of acceptance. My body at that time couldn't do what I needed it to do. And sometimes accepting that and surrendering to that is stronger than making a situation happen that might not need to happen. You know what I mean? Like if I had stayed there, I don't know what would have happened. And so following that little instinct inside that said, let's just go to the hospital. Maybe that was my mommy instinct, and nature telling me it's time, let's go. So just acceptance, I think. And if I have another, I'm very on the fence about that, to be honest. I don't know if I want to, because pregnancy was so horrific that in and of itself terrifies me. And I know every pregnancy is different. As a doula, I know I could have another and it could be amazing. It could be smooth sailing. But I did go through the process to remove my hemorrhoids. And that's also another story for another day of how awful it was and traumatizing. And that in modern science, we don't have a treatment other than what they do for them. All of those things make me be like, I don't know if I want to have another.
Yeah, your coping skills are probably the most Ashley thing I've ever heard.
It is, I know.
That also is how I still hear you kind of being a little bit hard on yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I want to congratulate you for is having all the plans in place.
I did. I definitely did.
You are a very realistic person. You wanted what you wanted, but you also knew that you had to have a safety net for yourself, for your baby, for your husband.
Yeah.
And you had amazing plans in place, and you just literally went through all the steps. And all your plans came to fruition, and they were all spectacular plans.
We used A, B, and C.
Right. You went through Z. And maybe you had like another alphabet in there too. And I know how hard you are on yourself just in general. So, and your body typically doesn't fail you in life. I mean, the things I want to go through, like all the things that you've done in your life, like from the New York Stock Exchange. Let me just back this up a little bit. When you came from my delivery, you couldn't stay. And here's why. You came immediately from your job at the New York Stock Exchange. When I told you that my contractions were every 5 minutes, you drove from Queens, it was like an hour drive.
Mm.
You stayed with me until I don't remember. We went to the hospital around 3:00 in the morning, I think. Or maybe that's when I got my epidural. It was the middle of the night.
Yeah.
It was
it was middle of the night.
Right. And you didn't leave until you literally had to leave to go to work the next day at the New York Stock.
And I hated leaving you.
You powered through the night. You got there and I asked you if you wanted something to eat. And I told my husband to get you something to eat and he forgot. So you powered through the night with no dinner.
Remember that.
I still owe you a roast beef sandwich.
I don't even remember it. See?
My point is, you are like the most intense, constantly driven, one-upping yourself person. You had all these side gigs. You had bubble soccer going on top of the New York Stock Exchange, and you were a doula. I was like, what are you doing with your life?
New York. You're a hustler.
Yes, yeah. Right. You took advantage of every opportunity you had, and you were go, go, go. And you've always been like that.
Yeah.
So I understand where your feelings of failure come from, because you have so many accomplishments and you just do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And it just happens.
Yeah. That's exactly right. To not do something I put my mind to.
Yeah. You do everything that you set your mind to.
Yeah.
And parenthood is just kind of that place where the world teaches you, okay, you're not in control anymore.
You're not the boss.
Right. But I love that you had every single plan in place, because you mentally prepared for that.
Yeah.
Maybe not emotionally, but you mentally prepared for that to be the case.
Yeah, that's 100% spot on. Like I did methodically prepare everything for the what ifs, but emotionally, I wasn't having a hospital birth. I was having my baby at home in the comfort.
You know how to do that.
Yeah.
You know how to do that.
The comfort of my own home, surrounded by my family. I'm going to eat my meal afterwards. I'm going to walk outside in the sunshine with my dog running around. No.
Yeah.
I didn't even shower for days.
Right.
But I guess there is a beauty too. And now if I do decide to have another with my husband, I am prepared for everything. I don't think there's anything that could happen to me, from the hemorrhoids to the numb hand to even, this is so stupid, but me and my husband were laughing the other day so hard because I was like, why does nobody talk about how gassy you get as a pregnant woman?
Right?
Wow.
Yes.
Like nobody. And I have this friend, she's been with her husband for like 20 years. They have 4 kids and she's never farted in front of him. And I was telling her, I'm like, how? Because I remember just each step coming.
Lose control of those muscles.
My husband one time was like, what's wrong with you? Because I was laughing. He walked in on me laughing. I'm like, I can't stop farting. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I just can't stop. I'm in no control of it anymore. And I'm doing yoga and every movement is
pushing everything out. Don't come in this room.
I mean, I just can't. At least now I tell my husband, I am prepared for everything.
Yeah.
If I decide to do another C-section electively, I'm prepared for that. If I decide to do natural, I know what to expect myself now for that. And any symptom that comes my way, I'm like, got it. Been there, done that.
Yeah. Doesn't make it easier though. Let me just tell you.
No, and it's very, I have like PTSD. If I could go into it knowing I would absolutely have I don't even want to say easy, just like a normal, enjoyable. Yeah, I would have another kid probably with no hesitation. But because of what I went through, I never had that how women talk about, I instantly forgot it all when I saw my baby. That wasn't me. It's still not me.
Yeah.
I still am traumatized by all the things. And I don't know if I want to do it again, to be very, very honest. So if you see,
that's fair.
If you see in the next few years that if I do, Antonio did something like really good to convince me.
For sure. I want to see that push present. Yeah. I mean, there is something to be said for a straightforward elective C-section.
Yeah. And I'm not judgmental of that.
Yeah.
As a doula, especially one who most of the women I was present for, they had natural, maybe they had an epidural, but they had a vaginal birth, And I used to think, I'm not doing the C-section. But now that it happened, I don't judge women, obviously, who elect for that, because it's like they don't have to go through hours and days of labor. And there is the recovery, which is awful. But
you've done it.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Motherhood summed up. I don't know.
Exactly. That is it. That's really it. Yeah. I just think we talk about all this stuff and if you just think about the reasons that people go into the hospital for anything, for any kind of procedure, there is anxiety and fear associated with that. But for the most part, most things, unless it's a unplanned emergency, are just straightforward procedures.
Right.
Most of the time, they get completely prepared for everything that's going to happen. And people come through it. They may be a little bit traumatized by it. They may have some anxiety, and that just feels normal for society.
Yeah.
But let's talk about how birth is not something that you can fully prepare for, because there are so many different directions in this adventure.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why it's traumatizing, because it doesn't matter how well you plan.
No.
There's always something that you didn't plan for and that you weren't emotionally prepared for. And how can you be? Because these are all scary things that are happening to you, from an epidural that's painful. The pain of childbirth and laboring and all of that, the stretch of time that most moms go through, most new moms go through labor, and then having to go a lot. Prodromal labor is very common. So the contracting really hard and fast for a long time and then suddenly not.
Yep.
Is exhausting and common. And we don't prepare new moms for all those possibilities. And so, of course, everybody's got PTSD when they come through the process.
Yeah, I think too, as a pregnant woman and a new mom, it's hard too, because there's a lot of misinformation out there or misguided, right? So I obviously was hearing two totally different ends of the spectrum, right? Because I was having a home birth. I had very experienced midwife. I came from that world and had worked with some wonderful doulas and midwives in New York City. And then I was seeing a practice that was midwives primarily, but also the OBs oversaw them, right? And they would tell me things sometimes when I would go to my appointment. It took everything in me not to just roll my eyes into the back of my head, because I'm like, you don't know that. Why are you telling me that? When I went to get, I think it was my 37-week checkup, just a routine. They just take your blood pressure, weigh you, all that. She was like, do you want me to check you? I'm like, no. She was like, no. I'm like, no. Do you need to check me? And she was like blown that I didn't want her to like put her fingers up in me for no reason, you know? And I'm like, I'm good. He's still in there, right? Everything's good. In the hospital, again, I cannot say how wonderful everybody was. The nurses were amazing. But even in some of the misinformation there, it was like, come on, guys, I know better than this. And then after I had the baby, like having to breastfeed him laying down. And of course, I'm falling asleep. And
then they're like, don't sleep with your baby.
Yeah. Most of the nurses left me alone, but this one in particular was like, not on my watch. And I was like, well, you're going to have to come pry him away from me then, because I can't sit up. And this is the only way I can feed him, and I'm exhausted. So it got to the point where my mom kind of was at the door when she would come in.
Yeah.
But
if someone's watching you, that's reasonable.
Right. And then I'm fighting it with what I know to be true on the other side of what can happen if you just let a woman's body do what it's supposed to do most of the time. But I think that's the hardest thing. And I was really lucky that I had that experience to draw on. So when they would say certain things to try to pressure me or make things seem a little bit more daunting than what they were, I had that knowledge, and I also had that support system to draw on. I could text another doula. I could talk to another midwife. I could go back to my training. And a lot of women don't have that. And it's something that I struggle with my own friends and family when they're pregnant and they're telling me, oh, my OB said this. And one of my friends told me the other day that they said my baby's going to be 10.5. I'm like, that exact, huh? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like,
magic.
Wow. They just took that baby right out and weighed it and put it right back in.
Yeah. Crystal ball.
I have to, you know me, so I have to like hold my face in and be like, oh, really? I'm like, oh, well, that's a good guess of them. And inside I want to be like, there's no way of them knowing that. And them already scheduling you for a C-section is not fair. They have no clue. And when my son came out, guess how much he weighed?
How much?
6 pounds, 5 ounces.
Of course, because he was just being a stinker.
I mean, he was as skinny as can be. He was long. He was like 22 inches long. But he was so tiny. And I remember being like, that's what was causing all this trouble.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think that a lot of where the pressure might come from, especially since seeing a lot of what some of these OBs have seen.
Yeah.
I think on top of analyzing the data and having the need to inform patients of the most up-to-date evidence-based data.
Right.
They also have their own trauma.
Right.
So what they're doing is trying to prevent you from going through the worst case scenario that they've seen.
Right.
And that's why they're trying to be very convincing.
Yep.
And so I want to say it's from a place of love, but you're right. It's misguided.
Yeah. I don't think there's any malicious intent ever.
Right.
A doctor caring for their patient, especially when there's a little baby involved,
Right.
ever.
Yeah.
But I do think
everyone's dealing with their own emotions. And that's why it's really important to have these conversations.
Yeah. I think for people that are not comfortable with the home birth route, I think the route where you have both, where you maybe see a midwife primarily and then an OB oversees it, that was great in my opinion. The practice I went to, they're actually an hour now because we moved recently. And it's not convenient for me to go to them. I still go to them for my annuals and stuff because I felt supported. It's a women's practice. So it's all women doctors and midwives. And I think if we can, as technology and knowledge spreads and information gets out there, because we went from women used to have babies at home to this huge push to now they only have them in hospitals. And we're starting to see it trend the other way a little bit. Now women are getting more comfortable with the thought of, I don't need all these things necessarily. And the hospital's there if I need it. I think that's really cool. And I think as we continue to trend that way, I think there's going to be a lot of really healthy conversations and developments between the two. Because is there a place for an OB? Absolutely. 100%. There's a place for them and there's a need for them. But is there also a place for a midwife for a woman who doesn't need the interventions? Yeah. So I always get really excited when I see my midwife or other midwives that I follow post young women who are having babies at home. And my desire is, as a mom and a former doula, is to see a happy marriage between the two.
Yes.
Where neither is threatened by the other. OBs don't feel away when you say, hey, I do want to have a home birth, or I'm coming to the hospital, but please don't make me lay down the whole time I'm in labor. Let me walk around if I'm able to. Let me kneel or whatever, do what my body tells me to do. And midwives also, there's no judgment if a person's like, hey, I can't do this, I'm going to the hospital. I think that is ideal if we can get to that happy best of both worlds.
Let's all just work together.
Yeah.
Let's all be open and honest and be there for each other.
Exactly.
And I think we're going to do a whole lot better if we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not so surprised by the weird things that our bodies do.
Exactly. Well, Ashley, I really enjoyed this conversation with you, and I'm glad that I've been able to share this with you, because I really wanted to do something for you because you were so amazing for me.
Thank you.
So I'm glad we got to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and thanks for doing this. This is definitely very much needed.
To help more moms find this podcast, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review to tell me what you think. To find more information about guests from each episode, please see the show notes at birthjourneyspodcast.buzzsprout.com. There you can also learn how to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you for listening. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to share the podcast with a friend who can benefit from the valuable insights that we share here. And if you could take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me. If you're ready to work one-on-one with me to embark on a transformational journey towards a confident and empowered hospital birth experience, go to kellyhof.com/empowered and enroll in my Empowered Hospital Birth Coaching Program. Together, we'll create a roadmap to a birth experience that you'll cherish forever. That's KELLYHOF.com/empowered. Let's make your birth experience extraordinary.